Information party. Information party.
Hi, everyone.
Information party.
Hey, Marcin.
Hey.
Hello.
Hey, how's everyone?
Good yourself. I like your hair today, Marcin.
Yeah, just got it demolished by some crazy barber last night, so yeah.
Oh my God. All right, Kevin.
Hi, everyone.
Just showing his hair for the 2 seconds. That's impressive.
Information party.
Hey, Marcin. It's like 10 a.m. Aren't you
Hey,
up
how's
since
everyone?
5?
Yeah, but
Good yourself. I like your hair today, Marcin.
I'm like with a baby. This is hard.
We get our holiday next Monday.
It's Labor Day on Monday, so we just basically take like a 5-day period.
Just in case.
Yo, Kevin, that means I don't have to work, right?
That's impressive.
Information party.
Yeah, everybody, EOS is closed
It's
today.
like 10. Yeah. We did get that a while back, right? People saying, well, it's a holiday. So we were off.
Dar, are we
Dar's
listening
watching
to Israeli NPR?
Yeah.
I'm here. My phone's about to die, so I'm probably going to leave and join in a few minutes again. But good to see and hear you all. I'm waiting for our next global conference.
It got announced yesterday. It's tomorrow, and it's the farthest point on Earth from you.
It's in Antarctica, so we can get an Antarctican BP, right?
Yeah, you should leave now.
I've always wanted to go to Antarctica, so I think this is a great excuse.
I still need to get that continent off my checklist. So
All right.
There is an
well,
EOS
it is. So it's
EOS Alliance,
7:03.
welcome.
Folks are still joining. We've got 23 people on the call. Oh, Kevin Wilcox, nice to see you. Yay!
Hi, Amy.
Hi. How are you?
Good, good. And this is actually Ben's Zoom account, so we don't have the ability to do breakout groups in with this call specifically. If we decide,
Oh,
yeah, we'll have to make a new Zoom link, and everybody can join that to do breakout rooms.
Well, we'll see. Right now, we've got 24 people on the call, including Ian and myself. We'll see how many people end up joining, but maybe let's just go ahead and get started.
Amy, before
Ian
you do,
and I had.
Sorry to interrupt. There is a raise hand function. Maybe we want to use that at some point, where if someone wants to say something, they can raise their hand. Just an idea.
Oh, perfect. Let me actually pull that up on the phone. Okay. Let's see. Kevin Wilcox, do you have access to that function? Because I'm actually just looking at this on my desktop
What
right
I'm
now.
seeing is if you go on the bottom bar, you see participants, and then you click on participants,
Oh,
it'll
I
be
see.
a list, and there'll be a raise hand.
Okay.
I just raised my hand if it helps you guys to look at
I
it.
see it. Yep, I see it. Very cool. Awesome. Great.
What are we raising our hands about?
so-
Because it broke up a little bit.
Martin, if you look on the bottom bar, you see there's participants. So you can click on that on desktop, and that'll bring up a list of participants, and there'll be a raise hand button underneath all the list of participants there. So you can raise your hand if you want.
Just making the function known, Marcel.
Oh, okay. I thought we were already voting on something.
All right. Well, it's 7:05, so I feel like everyone who's going to join is probably here now. So, this is a call of the EOS Alliance Dispute Resolution and Arbitration Working Group. Ian and I are both members. I don't know if you guys have had a chance yet to go ahead and look at members of that group, but we've compiled a pretty impressive list of folks, both with knowledge of the EOS blockchain, but also veterans in online dispute resolution, and those specific folks, some of them have been, looking into these types of issues for, the past 2 or 3 decades. So there's a lot of expertise right now for the members of the working group. The function of the call we're having today is really to get a better sense of what block producers are thinking right now in terms of what they want to see for arbitration, where they want it to go. We had a very short discussion before some of you guys joined the call, and even though we don't necessarily need block producers to, we don't necessarily need the buy-in of block producers. The thing is, we want it, right? And we think that it's really important, just because you all have your communities that you guys are accountable to. Sorry, I'm looking at the chat. You guys all have your communities that you're accountable to, and we want you guys to be socializing this concept with your communities, because right now, as you've seen in Telegram and Reddit and all the other social media channels, there's been a lot over the past weeks and months going on in terms of the community saying, do we even want arbitration? What is arbitration? Why do we have arbitration? Code is law, right? And so I think it's important to take a couple steps back and have this discussion. I'll give a super quick introduction of myself, and then Ian, you can give a quick introduction of yourself. My name is Amy Wan. I'm chairing the EOS Alliance Dispute Resolution and Arbitration Working Group. I am an attorney by training, started my career in the U.S. federal government doing international regulatory policy, then was general counsel at a real estate crowdfunding startup. I've been partner at a law firm, and most recently I left to start my own legal technology company. Today, I am founder and CEO of SageWise. What we're actually doing at SageWise, what we've been doing for the past year, is we're actually building dispute resolution infrastructure for smart contracts, a safety net, if you will. And, I can get into all that some other time. But we've actually been working on looking at the issues that you guys are now facing for the past year. And we've compiled our own, advisory group to figure out, well, how does dispute resolution, how does arbitration, how do alternative legal systems or alternative justice systems look like when you take them online or, off of the real world? And how do we architect and design a system that promotes, principles of fairness, transparency, efficiency, things like that? So that's me in a nutshell. Ian, do you want to give a quick intro about yourself?
Sure, thanks. I first started in this field in 1995, and the key thing that I discovered then was that to do bonds on the net, which is what we were doing, bonds are contracts, and contracts involve law because they get disputed. So I invented this thing called the Ricardian contract, which is sort of floating around and is now being adopted by EOS. A bit later on, I got myself into a very heavy arbitration and discovered dispute resolution at the sharp end. And it occurred to me at that time that, disputes happen all the time. Disputes just cannot be avoided. No matter what we do in the code, people are always going to fight over something. And so I adopted arbitration as a mechanism into a certification authority called CA Cert. I was the auditor, so I was able to suggest this as a solution to their problems. And it worked out quite stunningly well because it turned CA Cert, which was a group of disparate techies across the world, from an argumentative bunch of geeks into a worldwide professional organization. And it then, it occurred to me that arbitration was a piece of the puzzle, the glue, that turn disparate people into a community. So I've since been working on incorporating that model into the different places I work so as to create community. And therefore, what do I mean by community? I mean something where a lot of people come together and establish at least a baseline of rules and enforcement of rules so that they can rely on each other to a limited extent and then build all the other stuff on top, which is where I'm coming from. Okay, that's my quick wrap up.
Great. So, and for those of you who are just joining the call, the purpose of this meeting is to really figure out where the BPs stand on arbitration and basically engage you guys in terms of figuring out, what do we want this arbitration system to look like to the extent that there is one. We could go and give you like this academic or legal lecture about why is dispute resolution and arbitration so important in blockchain, right? Or in any sort of economic ecosystem. But at the end of the day, I think when it comes to you guys, I truly do believe that, and I'm sure Ian believes this as well as the other working group members, that to the extent EOS has a well-designed system, it's going to improve and boost the token value, right? Because at the end of the day, the purpose, from what I gather from the white paper, all this stuff of EOS, is to attract small businesses, because small businesses transact so much, and in order to attract small businesses, you have to provide them a medium of recourse so that they can go and truly achieve their contractual intent. So I think to just start off as a baseline for this discussion very quickly, can we get an idea for those of you in the room, maybe just an initial question, who doesn't want arbitration within the EOS ecosystem? Kevin, is there a poll function?
Yeah, so we can do the raise hand thing, or you can just do a yes or no in the chat. If you do want arbitration, say yes. If you don't want it, just say no in the chat. That's probably the best way to go about it.
Just to clarify, is the question, do you want arbitration at the base layer, or is it, do you want arbitration available in any shape or form at some point somehow? Because I think you're going to get a very different answer.
Yeah, Marcin.
Yeah, the latter.
I guess I just want to clarify, is the question in terms of general base layer, like what it currently exists in its current form right now? Or is it, would you be wanting arbitration, or sorry, the question was, you don't want arbitration in any way, shape, or form?
Right. It's the latter question. So it doesn't matter what the arbitration system will look like, whether it's the one we have today or a modified version of it. Is there anyone that doesn't want arbitration in some shape or form, period, or dispute resolution? So I'm seeing people respond in the chat. So folks are saying we want to establish transactional confidence. Yes, you want dispute resolution, but it really comes down to the details. As long as it's a free market without a central committee, yes. Okay, so I'm not here. Yes, decentralized. Okay, so I'm not hearing any objections to having arbitration in the network in some shape or form. So good. At least we've established that foundation. So let's talk about then what you guys want it to look like. I'm seeing a couple of comments here that you guys want something that's not centralized, that's very decentralized, that looks more like a free market. So let me, I'm going to take a guess then that the system that has been proposed today, ECAF, that is not what we're looking for. Type this question in. So is ECAF not what we're looking for because it's too centralized? Okay, so you guys will take a couple minutes to respond to that question. Crickets here, huh?
Yes, maybe this is something that we can answer. Just saying it, because writing it will be kind of hard, to just explain yourself in a yes or no question.
Okay, sure. How about let's do the raise hand function. So the first one I see is Kevin Rose. Kevin, do you want to
Sure.
take the floor and talk for a little bit?
Yeah, I thought it was really good at the beginning of the call when you said, the purpose that we're all here is to understand what the block producers want out of this. And I think that there are two separate opinions that I imagine we all have. One is, how arbitration and dispute resolution as a whole functions, but then there's the incredibly relevant how is a block producer entity expected to behave, and what are their responsibilities in a dispute resolution architecture. So I think one of the things that's important to us at EOS New York is the way in which we are involved with communication and the expectation of enforcement, and sort of what are our roles and responsibilities and what do they look like. That's besides is dispute resolution at the DAP level, base level, whatever. It's what's expected of block producers, and how can we limit the amount of exposure that block producers have in general to the entire architecture. Because the design goal for me is do less. As if the least amount of involvement as possible is ideal for us.
And I think you bring up a good point. This entire system basically does need to be architected so that it's actually scalable. Otherwise, let's say one day EOS is a very popular network. There's going to be hundreds of millions, if not billions of transactions, and certain percentage of those are going to go to disputes. You guys are going to be stuck if it's some sort of manual process with something that is completely unscalable. Instead of, doing what you're supposed to be doing, you're going to end up, enforcing, arbitration resolutions all day long, which is, I think is probably not what you guys want to do. Josh raised his hand. Josh, do you want to take the floor for a couple seconds?
Yeah, I just wanted to touch on the decentralization request that most people were popping up. I think the biggest thing is that we currently don't have the referendum contract on chain. So the fact that ECAF wants to have their members voted in by the community and basically accepted by the community, that's something they do want. But a lot of people are saying, hey, they just chose these members despite their intention and their will to have everything be accepted by the community. So there's just an issue of chicken and the egg right now that's going on with the referendum contract and ECAF as a whole. So I believe that ECAF's goal and desire is to not be a centralized authority, to actually be accepted by the community in a way that we can point to and say, hey, look, everyone accepted us and voted for us. So there's just this chicken and the egg thing that's going on.
Yeah,
I think so long as we're on this discussion of what do we not like about the current system and how do we want to change it? What else are people concerned about? Ivan, you raised your hand?
Yes, Eve. So one of the things I think that's important to have in terms of discussion as well, that's been brought up in the last week or so, are the different types of forms that can exist in terms of arbitration on chain. So right now, ECAF is the only one that we really have or that we know of at this point. My impression was always that the intent was to have multiple forums pop up. I still believe that it's still the intent of ECAF to allow other forums to pop up. I have never heard Ian or anybody else talk about ECAF being the sole forum that would exist. I've never heard anybody say that if two parties are consenting and they choose to appoint a particular forum, that it would not be valid under the current constitution and everything. So I think that that's also important. I think ECAF right now is the default arbitration forum, but there's nothing stopping any other forums from popping up and parties from consenting to give arbitration, not powers, but I guess arbitration responsibilities to a different forum. So I think that that would be an interesting discussion as well to have.
So that is reflecting, I think, a comment that we saw in the chat around you want some sort of free marketplace, something that fosters a little bit more competition. Okay. I am seeing, hold on, Ian raised his hand. Ian, do you want to take the floor for a couple seconds?
Sure. Just to respond to the decentralized issue, ECAF, myself and everybody involved were completely surprised that there was no referendum contract at the beginning. We were expecting it to be delivered, and that's how it is. It didn't get delivered. Well, here we are. The second thing is I want to get away from this attention on ECAF as being the point of centralization. It isn't ECAF that is the nexus of centralization. It is the Constitution. The Constitution is one document, and it applies to every packet that goes out on the EOS network. So you have to look at the Constitution and see what it's capable of doing. And in a very small clause, it's capable of listing ECAF, because it does that. It could be capable of listing 2 or 3 more forums, but again, the forums themselves still aren't the point of centralization. What is the real point of centralization is the rules of dispute resolution. In a proper arbitration clause, you have to list the rules of dispute resolution for the forum. And any arbitrator can pick that up, and as long as they work to the same rules, the system is compatible across the space. So the real issue is, are the rules of dispute resolution a good system? And can we, if you like, easily add forums to that? And apparently the answer is yes. We have added the Chinese forum, EMAC, to it simply by asking them the question, do you agree to the rules of dispute resolution? They said yes. So now EMAC is accepted as a dispute resolution forum. Technically, they did this by just joining ECAF as a franchise, but that was, details, implementation details. So we are already in the position where we can add any number of forums. The question of decentralization, however, is on the rules of dispute resolution. Do we want to decentralize the rules of dispute resolution? And I would say you have to be careful about that, because once you do that, if you have multiple rules of dispute resolution, we may end up with multiple chains, maybe not in digital form, but in reality. So I'll stop at that point.
I just have a super quick question, Ian, because it's been like 2 weeks since I looked at the RDRs. The RDRs, if I remember correctly, they do reference ECAF a lot, right? Because I feel like I remember it saying like, ECAF will choose your arbitrators for you. ECAF will come up with a handbook. So it does specifically mention ECAF a lot, right? Oh,
absolutely. Before mainnet launched, we had never even heard of the issue of decentralization of arbitration, et cetera, et cetera. So it was written with one forum in mind, one set of rules, and it was written as the base layer to support all other things. It's certainly an open question as to how we would then move forward and literally add more forums. And to be honest, the business with EMAC being added is a hack. Technically, it's quite legal, but it's a hack. So we should really add some clauses to the rules of dispute resolution. to formalize that process and make it more obvious, more clear.
Okay. There are a couple other folks who have raised their hands. I still want to continue this discussion. I think, it would be most constructive if, regardless of whatever existed today, we really want to hear, what you want to see out of a new system, regardless of what exists today, right? And that could be, we're suggesting improvements to ECAF, or, just, pull crazy ideas out of your head. I'm going to butcher names here. Chitty from EOS Argentina. Is that right?
Yes, that's my name. Thank you. Yeah, I agree with something that Josh, Ian, and I've said about, the core problem of having one ECAF. And I think the origin of this is if it's going to be one organization that has power, like binding rules power, they need to be elected. As the power in EOS originates from the EOS token holder. So if you're going to give out binding orders that you want people to obey, because I think the idea is that block producers need to obey the orders of ECAF, then we need to have the referendum contract, which is a shame that we don't have it right now, so that they can give out binding orders. And I think that's the main concern that the community is having, not just the block producers, because like some people said before, we don't know who elected. I don't think maybe very little people know who elected the arbitrators today, who they are, why they were elected. We are a community of thousands and thousands of accounts, so I think it's only fair to to have elected arbitrators, as long as they're going to have binding power. If not, they're just going to give out opinions, and then block producers that do have this binding power by the EOS token holders, they can decide whether to apply it or not. Maybe we could change, or maybe we should change the constitution to either remove ECAF and have several forums that give recommendations, or to have one ECAF that has elected members by referendum. So I think maybe sometimes we're rushing things. We wouldn't mind to wait until we have the referendum and we have a legitimized institution that gives binding recommendations.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is you guys are looking for voice, representation, transparency, and accountability. Okay, great. This is a fantastic discussion so far. I'm butchering another name, Marcin?
Well, basically, Chitty said it all, what I wanted to say. These are the concerns we have, like even from speaking to the token holders, to the EOS stakeholders, that the current state of ECAP does seem quite self-appointed, so to speak. And this is something I've been sort of pretty vocal on Telegram, as Ian probably knows. We had a few good debates on that, and it keeps coming back, and it doesn't seem to be going away with the people that are in EOS. We know a few big token holders ourselves, and this is their primary concern, like to the point where when we talk about setting up businesses on EOS, we are in talks right now with two big companies in Poland. One of them is probably like the biggest freight provider in European Union. This is a Polish company, but it happened to monopolize the market of freight, of truck transport in Europe, and they are looking at blockchain to port their business onto, and we've been in talks with them. And so this question has been there, like who's ECAF? Like, where are they? Where did they come from? Like, how come? Like, what are they doing? And things like that. So I think there's a lot of possible fallout from doing this sort of under the table, as opposed to like as expressed, to have this elected, and also defining the scope very precisely as to what actually ECAF is entitled to do. Because this is another one of our concerns, more probably in-house, that a body like this that sort of spreads around and tries to handle all the disputes, I don't see this scaling. This is why we think it should be left to free market to sort of specialize in certain areas of certain disputes, also dApps that would do this and kind of do it in the lean way where the incentives are aligned with the payouts and where the market can promote whatever mechanism is efficient. So that's me.
Okay, so to summarize, it sounds like you also had you and community, your community have grievances about the process as well, and you would like to see something more scalable and something that allows for specialization in certain types of disputes. Okay. We have more hands. I'm going to try and limit the floor now to 60 seconds at a time so that, everyone can get a chance to speak. Tiago? Is that how I pronounce your name?
It's me.
Okay.
Sorry. Hey, just building on what Ian said and also Marcin and the others, I totally believe in the free market for arbitrators. And Ian said something that's interesting for me, that the rules of dispute resolution should be we should have one of those for the chain because of the risk of just splitting the chain if you have multiple rules of dispute resolution. But what I understand, and I'm here actually drawing from our government systems that we have, at least in the West or at least in Brazil, we actually have a constitution, and then also the legislative power, they get to vote on these rules of dispute resolution that would be like the civil process here or the criminal processes. And this is also voted by people to say, okay, or by their representatives to say, okay, this is how we will resolve disputes arising from the constitution or from the laws. So I really understand the point about not electing the arbitrators. I think it's kind of key that you have specialized people and that are not subject to voting because they will have to make controversial decisions and they have to go against the majority sometimes. But maybe the rules for dispute resolution could be voted and not centralized in that way. So you have at the same time the rules for dispute resolutions that are unique for all the chain or for the base layer at least. And at the same time, you have the free market of arbitrators or even forums working on top of that. So that's just more of a question and a reflection here.
Got it. Thank you so much. Orchid. And remember, we're going to try and keep this to 60 seconds each. Thanks.
Okay, so I agree with Marcin's idea of setting rules and responsibilities really clear, because we have been seeing ECAF's ruling mostly for blacklisting on-chain, right? Us BPs have been struggling to get the on-chain governance regarding the ECAF. So I would really want us to discuss, not us, the community, to discuss what it should be the roles and responsibilities of ECAF and maybe other dispute resolution forums, if it could be, if there could be another ones, and what kind of ruling actions should be possible on chain, especially. So I would really want that kind of discussions before we talk about election of ECAF as an organization. That's it.
Great, fantastic. Thank you for that feedback. Kevin Rose, is your hand still raised, yes, or did you raise it a second time?
Yes, I'd like to make a remark to what Ian said about EMAC. I do not recognize EMAC as an arbitration body. I will not, at EOS New York, honor anything or any communication that comes from them for any reason at all, ever, until something were to change that would allow me to point to the Constitution or somewhere a governing document that says the blockchain recognizes the authority of EMAC to conduct arbitration on chain. The consent of the individuals.
Okay, so
the consent of the individuals to arbitrate is not enough for me when it comes to blockchain.
Yeah, can I just respond to that? I did mention that EMAC was a hack. The literal thing that has been done is that the EMAC arbitrators have been absorbed into ECAF. So they are ECAF, and ECAF is listed in the Constitution. So they are, if you like, following the same chain of legitimacy as the existing system.
I would accept that then. And to summarize my point is that only communication originating from ECAF official account ID is something we would listen to, nothing else.
And that's how it should be done. And that is the situation we're in. So we need to separate the conversation from where we are right now to where we would like to be in the future.
Josh, did you have your hand raised again?
Yeah. So just getting back, continuing on with what Ian is saying about going forward, I encourage anyone who hasn't read EOS New York's proposal for Reg Arbitrator and Reg Forum to go through and read that. I think that's a very crucial step we need to take as a chain. I was wondering if anyone has any disagreement to it that has already read it. Just to summarize it really quick, if anyone hasn't read it, it's just a way for someone to call reg producer on themselves, but as an arbitrator or as a arbitration forum.
One thing I'd like to add to the proposal is that a lot of the language in there is it doesn't have to be that way at the point at which it's voted on if we get there. So I know, Ian, you have very strong feelings about UNCITRAL model and some of the things that were written in there. And we are not experts on that. It's we've meant to do our very best to propose something that could be possible and then to spur conversation. So it's all available for debate. And the core of the proposal are the two functions that Josh. I
am seeing Jose raise his hand.
Yes, hi. Jose from EOS Meso here. I just wanted to point out that I think the general fear that exists from people that are positioned to ECAF is largely undefined, at least in terms of blockchain. We would like to see more clarity in how, and I've proposed several throughout the couple of months, like just crazy ideas of how you link an arbitrator to the system, because our fear is coming from places where there's so much corruption that we are throwing out the virtues of blockchain by introducing this body that has power over the block producers, which, if done incorrectly, can sort of beat the purpose. Thank you.
Thanks for that. If you have raised your hand and you've spoken your piece and no longer want to speak again, can you just make sure that you unraise your hand, just so we are clear who still wants to speak? Okay, so that's cleared up the queue a bit. Well, look, this has been a very, I think, enlightening and informative discussion. Certainly much better than the ones over like Telegram and Reddit and all of these where it's like, not so much of a guided discussion. So thank you for this. So aside from how we would, what changes we would like to see in the process and the design and architecture, I did want to take a couple minutes and ask all of you as block producers, what do you as block producers see as either your role or non-role in arbitration, especially with respect to enforcement? Because I know there have been a lot of concerns around scalability. Anyone wants to raise their hand? Marcin?
Yeah, so probably sum it up this way. we're actually proponents of this lean governance on EOS concept, which means that it's probably not in the domain of arbitration to chase around, for example, small thefts that happen every day, or handle all this little dirt that happens in life. And from all these discussions that we're having up till now, it's been brought up a lot that EOS is a governed blockchain, and we respect that. Actually, we think it's a brilliant idea, but I think the scope of the governance and how it's defined is actually where this is going to be the make it or break it for EOS, whether this is well designed and non-interventionist, which we are the advocates of at Tokenica. And we would hope to see that being the case, because that can preserve the power that people see in blockchains, where they do not have to trust any other entities, and a lot of this is handled by the tech. But still, when things go really wrong and there's like multi-billion-dollar losses or smart contracts go off the rails and things like that, then there is some sort of a recourse. So this is our sort of ideal vision of EOS, where the technology and which is coming handles all the little things, and we have staking and time delays and all these things that can protect us from everyday harm. But when things go really wrong and there needs to be some sort of a scope and threshold set beforehand, then we can revert to arbitration that has a sort of an emergency role at the base layer, and everything else we would like to offload onto the free market, so people do the dispute resolution in their own on their own terms, basically, as it is in the civil law. So this is how we see this progressing forward, ideally. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much for that. Ian, you had your hand raised.
Sure, thanks. Because we're talking about block producers, I'd just like to put out there one of the design principles or objectives that we had before mainnet launched. And it's fair to say that our thinking has changed and is changing over time. But just to put this sort of stake in the ground, one of the things we were really worried about was that EOS was going to be very large, much larger than the other DPoS chains, and very powerful. So we thought that there was going to be a big risk of attacks against block producers from courts, from governments, from insiders, from this, from that, and so forth. Now, we know that DPoS allows the community to vote out the block producers. But what we do know is that the voters are close to apathetic, and there's a bunch of whales that will control the end result. So what we lack, if you like, is voter activity to enforce that, and we lack, if you like, whale incentives. So arbitration was brought in to give an additional incentive to the block producers. And it works to the favor of the block producers, because what it does is it allows the block producers, the block producer to sit there and say, we just do this job. And if anybody wants to interfere with us, they should go to the arbitration forum and get it ruled on. So if your local courts come along and say, we don't like what you put in the newspaper, you say, okay, where's your arbitration ruling? We follow the arbitration. So you now have an additional defense against all those forces that are out there. As well as the voting, you can now say, we follow the arbitration rulings. And you haven't got one, so we can't do anything about that unless you lock us up, which is a much higher bar. Now, that is good in general, but there are some consequences to that. And I think it was Rick or Kevin who brought this up. It also brings us the situation whereby we can now start to accept rulings from around the world according to the UNCITRAL or arbitration model, because the New York Treaty says, you can actually have an arbitration in America and serve it in Russia and get it enforced. So you now have the possibility, and this is, if you like, a negative consequence of what we've done. We now have the possibility that arbitration could accept far too many rulings from outside simply because they made sense to the arbitrator. So there's pluses and minuses going on here, and our thinking, if you like, or our process is evolving as time goes on. But basically, I want to put out there that point. The arbitration was set up with many specific goals, but one of them was to protect the block producer from outside interference, to give them a channel to say, that's where we get interfered with. go over there.
Great. Thank you for that, Ian. It is, at least my time, 45 past the hour. I don't want to take up too much more of your guys' time. Thank you again for, contributing to discussion. I think it's one of the best that we've had so far. If there is no one else who wants to, give their 2 cents, and remember, this is an ongoing process. We definitely want you guys to remain engaged. And if you think up other things, feel free to ping me, feel free to ping another member of the working group, shoot an email, send a Telegram chat, whatever, right? If any ideas come up to mind. But, barring that, I just want to end this discussion by saying that, I hear all of you in the sense that a lot of you guys are very concerned about the process, right? And so, I can't tell you right now what the process is going to be for this working group, because right now we're still in this discovery phase and we are trying to move quickly. But we do have assembled, a very high caliber team of experts on online dispute resolution. We are going to continue to engage the community. I will make a commitment to you guys that we are going to try and keep this process as transparent as possible so that we can get, input from everyone and hopefully produce findings and recommendations that the community is much more willing to accept and is bought into. So, anyone else want to leave any parting thoughts? All right. Well, wherever you guys are, thank you so much for waking up early or staying up late. I believe this is live streamed and the public will be seeing this. And again, if anyone has any thoughts or ideas, feel free to ping Ian, myself, and other members of the working group. Thanks so much, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.